for those of you who may not know me, my name is B. Scott. And about 20 years ago, I started Love B. Scott brand. And that brand, I initially started it to create space for myself. And when I first started, there was no inclusion for me, meaning in Black media or honestly in the LGBTQIA community, especially how I was presenting. Back then, we didn't even have the language of how to describe me. I think I started out saying that I was androgynous, and then it went to gender nonconforming, and now we landing on trans non-binary. And so for me, when people, especially here at Cannes, they have been throwing around this word inclusion a lot. And when I hear it, it's personal to me because I have been fighting for years for myself to be seen, for myself to be able to hold space, and to, by doing that, encouraging others to understand that you have a right to be who you are. And I had no idea that that platform would become one of the largest celebrity news and entertainment platforms, reaching millions of Black women and the LGBTQIA plus community. And to be here now feels so great because I'm, for the first time at Cannes, and being a part of the inclusion that I, in some way, helped create. So it's surreal. Like I said coming in here, I was like, the love, people have been pulling me every way but loose. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for all the support through the years, everyone that's come up to me and said, like, you encouraged me to be who I am. That means the world to me. And that's why I keep doing it. Because I really do believe that there are so many people, even though the younger generation now is like, okay, non-binary, so what? I still think there are a lot of people who are struggling to just be.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing that I think, and I know that I'm most proud of, is that I have encouraged people to just be whatever that is, regardless of how people react. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm gonna hand it over to Maria so she can say her piece.
No, that was beautiful. Thank you. And Resonate. So for those of you that know me, Maria Teresa Hernandez, I lead brand partnerships for a tech company called MIRRIAD. We specialize in virtual product placement, and what that means is turning the old school model of product placement into a digitized ad format. So as cool as the technology is, we're bringing advertisers into content, into programming, into TV shows, music videos. So we live within the entertainment ecosystem. So we're, one day I could be talking to Bad Bunny's team or BET or working with, Walton Isaacson on the brand side. So it's really fun. But I think what you said, when I joined MIRRIAD, it was personal because first of all, I'm like a unicorn, a Latina executive. The higher I went in my career, the lonelier it became because there weren't many women that looked like me, let alone Latina women. My biggest champions were Black women and Black men. And I am so grateful to that. And I realized as I grew in my career, I needed to reach back and be a voice. Even when I hate being on stages. As much as I'm an extrovert, I live in my imposter syndrome, and I'm very vocal about it because sometimes people don't speak about that. But I'm so, as you said, it's so personal to me to be that voice, right? So being in technology, I straddle technology, entertainment, advertising, 3 lanes that are very underrepresented when it comes to Latinas. And so it allows me to live in my the work I'm doing and just be, right? Own my Latinidad in this industry, but drive representation. And we'll talk a little more about that. But that's me.
And let me tell you something else about this fierce diva. If it were not for her checking her LinkedIn, I wouldn't be here right now because I had the wrong address. So I apologize in advance to everyone for keeping you behind. But that's how hard she works. She's constantly working.
And before you even get started, I want to say this. I hope that one day people will have the reaction to me that they have about you. So any person that I have mentioned your name to, they light up, they smile. They're like, I love him. You're going to do what with Aaron? I was like, it's been such a beautiful experience just even saying your name. Now I'm just saying this because I was like, ooh, I'm doing something with Aaron. So it's an honor. You're an icon, and I'm grateful to be on stage with you.
Well, thank you for that. And the truth is, anyone in our business knows It is a team effort. It is two of my team members are here, actually. They had the wrong address, too, so I was lucky I got here before them. But thank you for that. I received that, and it's really, really nice. That's true. That's true. So a little bit about me. I started my career back in '83. I started actually on the client side. So I used to work at Pepsi for years. Started as a research analyst in the research department, which I loved. I mean, I loved how data would tell stories and how those stories would ultimately lead to potential new ideas. And I kind of went through this system, ended up working on the brand side of Mountain Dew and Pepsi, and then they kind of transferred me to the West Coast, where I had the assignment of going out on the road with Michael Jackson for 18 months and managing that Pepsi relationship. And then that ended, and they had me working on all the other celebrity things. And quite frankly, I never actually thought about, when I was there, about kind of going off on my own. I loved the corporate world. I loved my responsibility at Pepsi, which was going out and finding talent. And at the time, I really remember thinking to myself, well, it's interesting because a lot of the talent I'm signing are Black and Latinos, and they're driving culture. And they're the ones that were really making Pepsi kind of relevant to this younger generation. And it was the first time I really started to understand the power that could have on a brand and how it could really help a brand move forward in a very positive way. But I also remember, this is during the 80s, and I wasn't out at the time. And it was a very different time. It's funny, you talk about the kids now, they're like, oh yeah, well, first of all, just from a statistical standpoint, 20% of Gen Z think of themselves as being a part of the LGBTQIA community. So you're right. For them, it's like, well, what's the big deal? Like, that's what it is. But for me, during that time, it wasn't, gay marriage wasn't a thing. AIDS was a thing, and people associated being gay with HIV, and there was all types of stereotypes, and it really did have an impact on jobs and things like that. So I really wasn't out. And I'm not saying that in a proud way. I'm just saying it in a real way. And one day, I remember even talk about belonging and the importance of it. I remember every Sunday, I would sit and read the New York Times sports section. Now, for anyone who knows me, that is not something could tell you chapter and verse about the theater section, but the sports section, and I did it because I wanted to go into the office and be able to have a conversation with everybody else. Even though it wasn't real for me, it was what I had to do. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, enough, I'm done. And the second that happened, the second that I decided to be like, this is who I am, love it or leave it, my work got better, my ideas got better, the things that I wanted to be engaged in, the things that I wanted the clients that I was working with to be engaged in, and it just changed it. Right now, we have an agency. We've got about 120 team members across the country. We're based, our headquarters is in Los Angeles, Culver City, actually, but we have kind of pockets now in New York, Chicago, Dallas. We've got some amazing clients. We call them partners because we really believe that a great relationship is about a partnership and not just about, doing work for someone and then getting a check. And we've been blessed that we've had a lot of great wins and a lot of good accolades. And it's not because of me, it's because of people like Kevin and Diori. Wave your hands. Just so you know, Diori on my left, your right, he runs the Lexus business for us. So all of the Black Panther, the Beyonce work that you've seen has been Diori, along with a lot of other things. And Kevin, raise your hand, Kevin runs the American Airlines business for us. So he's also worked on some of the Lexus business as well. But those are the two major clients, but they work across a whole bunch of things. So I'm lucky and blessed to have great people like that, and it makes my life a little bit easier.
I can listen to you talk that's like forever.
So soothing.
It's so comforting, soothing. Like, oh my goodness.
Usually people say I put them to sleep.
No, it's just soothing. After all the cannons, turbulence.
All every Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you, but for Teresa, so how has being a Latina really shaped your lens on inclusivity and specifically for the LGBTQIA plus community?
Yeah, I think, just as a Latina growing up in inner city Chicago, I realized there weren't many people that, were role models for me. My mother was as amazing as she is, and she was a powerhouse, but she was a single mom, working 2 jobs, going to school at night with 4 kids, right? So, it was great to have her, but I remember always wanting to turn on the TV and see, people that look like me that weren't the typical stereotype. And I remember seeing the movie Working Girl with Melanie Griffith, where she moves to New York City. And that one scene where she's on the ferry, and I was like, I want to be that. And I remember telling that story recently at a conference. I won't name the conference or the man. And he said to me, see, you're a Latina girl, and that's a white woman. All this talk about representation, there you go. You still were inspired. And I said, you don't get it. I don't want to look up to a white woman. That shouldn't be my aspiration. I should see women who reflect me. So living in that empathy of understanding what it feels like, in my disadvantage of being a Latina or people think of it as a disadvantage, I think of it as my superpower. Latina, a woman, I totally see that it's so important for us to advocate for marginalized and, groups that are not often represented or represented in ways that are misrepresentation. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And so, Aaron, I have a question for you that as she was talking kind of popped into my head. So, and something that happens with me, as a member of the community, as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, when you encounter brands that are not readily or don't readily understand the value of the community, how do you navigate that and how do you not take it personally?
It's a great question. So how do I navigate it? Generally speaking, I use data to help them understand the power of the community, the size of the community. When I talk to brands and they talk about, we want to be relevant and young. I was like, well, you want to reach Gen Z. How are you not going to talk about LGBTQIA? Because 20% of that market identifies that way. I'll tell you a funny story. I had one client, I won't say who it was. At one time we were talking about, we were talking about doing segment work. And they said, he said, Aaron, millennials are colorblind. And I thought about it for a second. I said, colorblind. So first of all, when is being blind a good thing? Actually, millennials are color confident and color competent. And when I said color, it wasn't just about ethnicity. It was also about gender. It was the whole thing. And I said, they see it. They celebrate it. They can't understand anyone who doesn't. So if, in fact, you want to connect with them, you have to get comfortable with how you're going to change. And so a lot of it is helping. And the other part of it is also understanding that people don't like change, right? They're not really comfortable with that. And so, I'm out there like, we got to go, we got to get ready. But we also have to okay, I got to get you ready. I've got to make sure that you have the data to make the right decisions. And you also have to be empathetic because if you look at the people that we generally deal with, which are CMOs, chief marketing officers, their lifespan in a job is 18 months. That's not a lot. It goes like that. So just by the nature of how they want to live their career, they don't want to do anything that may be perceived as hurting the business or may create some drama. And so they tend to not want to do anything. I help them understand that not doing anything is actually doing something and it's hurting them because their competitors, the smart ones, are leaning into it. And so, part of it is just giving them the data, making sure that they understand the opportunity cost of not doing it, and then sharing with them how active this is. By the way, it's not just about the LGBTQIA community, it's also about the allies. My mom is paying attention to brands that are supporting her son, right? And so when you start to look at the implications beyond just but by the way, I also give them all the data about this is what the spending is in the community, and so a lot of it is that, and eventually they do come around pretty much, because they also are very sensitive, and should be, to, this isn't just about a B2C relationship, it's also about how they're being perceived internally with their own employees. They want to make sure, they should make sure that the people internally that work for them are also feeling proud about what the company is doing to support their cousin, their sister, their brother, their mother, whoever it is. And so, a lot of it is just constantly, I'm in for the marathon, not for the sprint, and really kind of bringing them along. And then showing them the results, right? I'll give you one quick example in a client that we work with, Lexus. This is early on. We had them sponsor, now they're sponsors of HRC, but we had them sponsor HRC, and we had a dinner in Los Angeles. And Joe Salamis was the president at the time, so this is probably 20 years ago or so. And HRC received a letter. Are you guys familiar with HRC, the Human Rights Campaign? Everyone, yeah? And in fairness, I'm on the board, so I don't want people to think I'm just plugging them because I'm on the board, but this is a true story. So one of the consumers went to the HRC dinner and saw the Lexus display there, and saw the product specialist who was there and, talking about this cars and giving them information, all that sort of stuff. Joe received a letter and he passed it on to us, and the person who had been there said, and it was a straight person, by the way, said, hey, I just want you to know, I went to the HRC dinner. I was really, really proud of what I saw, and I was really excited that Lexus was a sponsor, and as a result, I've decided to buy 12. He was a fleet manager, so he bought 12 cars. So I got that letter, and I was like, all right, brought it over to the finance people. What is the implication financially for Lexus? And made sure people understood that. So, part of it is making sure that people see, this is a long answer to a very short question, but making sure
I'm in a master class. This is great.
Making sure people see the results, and it's not just the feeling, it's about, and I have to put my feelings aside because, we're all different, and I'm here to help these companies grow their business. And that's the bottom line. And that's how I approach it, which is, there's an opportunity out there. You're going to take it or you're not going to take it. You're paying me to help you grow your brand. And this is one way to do it. So,
Absolutely. Do you have anything to add in terms of how do you engage and get people to understand the value of the community?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, data for sure leading with that. I come from a different lens too of technology and being able to leverage technology in an innovative way that unlocks new opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be available. And Lexus, again, has been an amazing partner. In fact, they've probably, in the last 3 years have done the most with us in terms of diverse content and leaning in, to moments and content and empowering creators within programming that, for instance, they couldn't get into music videos that were filmed abroad, South Asian music videos, and we were able to get them in and place, the 3D model or a billboard. But what I would love that we did with Lexus, since we're on, and Lexus I will go hard for because they're just such amazing clients, and they get it, they show up. But they were looking to amplify their in-market LGBTQIA plus messaging, shine your way every day. And so we identified artists like Connie Garcia, who's a Puerto Rican Boricua artist out of Puerto Rico, identifies as queer. She's an activist. really vocal about, the trans violence happening in Puerto Rico. So it's something that's very important to her. So when we brought this opportunity to her, we knew she was filming a music video, Agua de Coco. And I said to her team, I said, listen, I'd love to place a billboard at the opening of your video. And this is something that's never really been done before. They're like, wait, what? A virtual billboard at the opening? Yes. Put me on the phone with your director. I just need him to film a scene where I could place a billboard right at the beginning. And I got them on the phone with my creative people, and the director said, okay, I'll shoot it. And in fact, we'll show some examples. But it was great at the opening of her video, and Gani was so excited about this because it meant to her something that was so special. And we did research with it. We had a Kantar study, and we had double-digit lifts in consideration, affinity, awareness, and it was great. And specifically within the LGBTQ plus community, it was just so high. It was like in the 30s. So it was really special to see that shine your way everyday messaging just show up at the opening of our video. And we got, in the first 90 days, over 20 million views across platforms. So it really, really did well. And then the other example, just to with advertisers that, obviously just finally seeing the value was Coi Leray with her video Players. And she wasn't going to shoot a video, but the song was so hot, and I was talking to her manager. And at the time, L'Oreal had a in-market campaign with Hunter Schafer, the trans activist and actor from Euphoria. And she was they were the face of Mugler. And we wanted to amplify that messaging. And Coi is so body positive and such an amazing ally, accomplice, I like to say. And I asked her manager, hey, we had great success with Gani. Can we do this with Coi? And Coi was like, absolutely. So again, we had them film, and she gave me 2 scenes, the opening with a drone, and they just left an open scene. And then a moment where she comes down, and this was her idea. She walks out, and you'll see it in a second. She walks out of her building, paparazzi is shooting, and she stops and literally lowers her sunglasses and looks up. The billboard wasn't there when they filmed it, but we inserted it, and it's Hunter Schafer as a nod to allyship and supporting the trans community.
That's incredible.
And she gave us a quote. We did press, and it was amazing. It got a lot of pickup, and that video is like around 15 million views. But it was incredible to be able to, leverage technology to empower diverse creators, but also amplify, in this case, allyship and trans, being able to amplify Hunter Schafer. If you want, maybe we can show that video. And I haven't seen the video yet.
That is very great.
Super cool. So.
Nice. Actually, this is not on this is going to be a spontaneous question. Actually, something that I experienced while I was here. An executive asked me, how can I gain license to the LGBTQIA plus community? Initially, I was like, license, it kind of was off-putting. But I'm going to give Grace and the benefit of the doubt. I think what the executive was trying to get at is, how can I authentically gain access to the community? And I'm going to give my response, and then I want you both to give your perspective. Like I said on the female quotient panel, because a similar question came up, I think the problem is you have to have someone from the community involved in all aspects of the process of reaching that said community. And so I see often, many times, where cis people are trying to reach the community, but they're not getting true input from the community. Mm-hmm. And so I said the way to do that is to have them involved. Like, you need a true representation, authentic representation. And that way you don't have to hypothesize about what would work. And that's how brands and agencies get it wrong, when you were not involved. And so I just wanted to hear both of your perspective on that. How would you take it if someone said, how can you gain license to the community? And what if also how I described it, that's not the right verbiage, what would you say? And then additionally, what is the best way to do so?
I love what you said. First, the first question I would ask is why they want to do it, to make sure that the reasons are authentic and they're not just doing it for rainbow washing, which I think a lot of brands do, and that kind of backfires with them. I'd also ask them what their commitment is. I tell people this all the time. You know, just going in and doing something. Look, I'm happy when people are supporting us during Pride Month, but I tell folks all the time, I am Black and gay 365 days a year. I'm not just Black during Black History Month. I'm not just gay during Pride Month. So it's important for you, if you're going to do it, to make sure you're consistent and you're doing it year round. Because I think that's where the mistakes happen, where people go into it and like, oh, I have to do it, and I'm just going to do it during 1 month, and then I'm pulling out. Because we remember, we think about it. And I also think you're right about making sure that there are specialists that are advising the effort. You know, most of these brands, when they do it and they get in trouble, it's because they don't have people like us. I'm not saying my agency, I'm just saying people of the culture giving them the advice and helping to steer and guide them in a way that feels authentic, that is doing it for the right reasons. And so I do think making sure, and by the way, that's not just about externally facing, it's also, I think people forget the importance of the internal responsibility that these leaders have to create an environment that is welcoming and supportive at the companies. Because when you do that, it will start to come out in the work. But if you don't do that, if you're just putting it out in the work and that's not part of your culture, eventually people will sniff it out and it'll feel inauthentic. Oh, you know, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. So I think you're spot on. I think having the right people around, I tell people all the time when, you know, if I need a brain surgery, I wouldn't go to my dentist, right? I'd go to a person or someone who understood that community and could give me advice that would help support my goals.
And just to add to that, I think, you know, and beautifully spoken, intentionality, authenticity, commitment, right? Really being committed. I think, you know, even for Hispanic Heritage Month, we see lots of brands show up once a month. It's frustrating. And then the rest of the year, they're absent. But, you know, it's so important to also think about, you know, the complexities and nuances of intersectionality when we think about identity and all the aspects of identity and how we identify, whether it's your gender, your sexuality, you know, your sexual preference, you know, your ethnicity. And so, you know, when we get deeper, you know, under the hood, when advertisers are trying to speak to, you know, audiences so broadly, we're not a monolithic, right? So, you know, somebody could be, you know, trans, but also is Latino. And also, you know, so we keep getting deeper. I think that's where we miss the mark, where, you know, you want to just check the box, but you don't really speak to that audience in a way. And it's just off, it's tone deaf sometimes. It just comes off wrong. And I think a lot of brands make that mistake. So having the right people in the room, you know, and the same thing, it's not just in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the writing rooms. I think that's a big miss for Hollywood and for entertainment. And where, you know, we've come a long way, but we still have so much work to do.
And we also have to be honest about our community ourselves too, because for a long time when we were talking about the community, it was mostly gay men. It wasn't the rest of the alphabet. It wasn't, you know, and we, I think, have gotten much better, the community got much better, to your point, of understanding the intersectionality, the, you know, not everyone in the LGBTQ plus community are suffering the same way. Trans, Black and Latino trans are
Being murdered
disproportionately getting hurt and murdered at a rate that people would find alarming. And so, you know, we've had to do our own little kind of self-checking, I think, to make sure that we were being representative of the entire community as well. So it works both ways.
Who are some of the brands that you feel that are getting it right? And And if you don't have to, but who are some of the brands that have gotten it wrong in the field of inclusion and also specifically the LGBTQIA plus community?
Well, I think when I think about the brands that are doing it really well, I think of Microsoft, I think of Gillette, I look at what Starbucks, Converse, Adidas have done. Adidas and Converse have not only committed long term, but they also created products that are, specific. And so I think they're doing a really, really good job of being authentic, committing long term, and also doing the work internally to make sure that people, that their team members have a sense of belonging and that are doing it. Who's doing it? Who's done it wrong? Well, obviously we saw what AB did, what Budweiser did. And I always say, by the way, I don't work for any of those brands that I said did it right. So I'm not trying to promote brands that I work with, but I think AB made a mistake because they forgot about the allies of those folks who were offended by what they did. I think they walked away from their core values of, it's one thing to talk about what you stand for. It's another thing to make sure that you're living up to it. And I think they're probably, and sadly, the person who, helped push that forward lost their job. And I think that was a mistake.
And just to add, it really needs to be a part of your core values as a corporation, as a company, versus just a marketing strategy, because then you don't pass the sniff test, right? We can,
especially the young generation.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the younger audiences that really care. They see you show up, they're going to show up. So, and just to add to a brand, we're actually working with P&G, and this is something I learned in working through this campaign with Always. And I didn't realize, so it was great. It was so exciting to see that they were targeting the trans community that are going through the change and using Always products. And it was a beautiful experience, and we're still working through it, but it was an education for me. And I was just so proud of this team where I was like, okay. And it was really cool. Yeah. So
that's amazing. And so as we, continue to move forward and, on the path of inclusion, what do you think the future looks like? In terms of what do you think in the next, 10 to 20 years? How do you see the pace of things progressing? And also, what would you suggest to help it get there sooner than later?
I'm actually kind of optimistic, if you want to know the truth. And I know that there's a lot of things that could make us feel not so optimistic, and you can't take politics out of this conversation because, there's one party that's trying to attack and take away rights and erase history, and another party that's not. But I'm optimistic because at some point, this generation of executives is, the Gen Z and the millennials and whatever other letter we're talking about are going to be in those spots where they're going to be making decisions. And I'm focused on trying to get some of those folks engaged in the advertising and media business because I want them to make sure that those types of decisions and that type of thinking is permeating the work and the world that I love, right? And so I'm really encouraged by the fact that there's future consumers and leaders that are on the right side of history. I also think that there are a lot of brands that want to do the right thing that just don't know how to do it in this environment. And so they're reaching out and saying, we're not going to back down. We just need to know how to do it in a way that is still supportive and allows us to do the right thing for the community, for our customer, for our employees, and allows us to continue to grow this. And times change and tactics change. And we have to be adaptable to that. Doesn't mean we step back or we retreat. It just means how do we continue to move the needle forward in a way that cuts through the noise that we're having. So I'm really feeling good about it, and I'm going to continue to plow on. I'm not letting any of the noise, which, there's a lot of noise out there that can be disheartening, but you got to keep your head up and keep moving forward.
And I think it's also the power of allies, alliances. For so long, we've lived in silos. The Black community runs, and then the Hispanic. And what I love that I've seen even here in Cannes is it's the power of working together, joining forces. And we're a mighty force. And, it's been a beautiful experience. Even for myself, I'm just a bridge, I'm a connector. And I love, seeing just the unity. And so many of us are collaborating, creating alliances. And I think if we just continue on that track of just joining forces together, the power of numbers. And Mike Roca from Omnicom yesterday said this, and I loved it. He said, it's not a moment, it's a movement, and it's a journey that we're just going to keep going on. We're not backing down. I mean, we've ebbed and flowed with inclusivity and DE&I, but, I think coming off, unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd, we're just even more, with this being this election year and how ugly it's been. And I live in optimism, but I know this time we're not backing down, and we just need to keep just staying focused and keeping the strength in numbers.
And I actually think that's a lovely way to end the panel, because
I can't believe it's over.
Yeah.
You guys made it so easy.
Yeah. I mean, with optimism and with the beauty of the LGBTQIA plus community, I would like to thank you both for coming here today. It meant the world to me. And I absolutely love you both. But it's an honor to be on the stage with such an icon.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, I bow down to you.
Listen to
and
all
I
of
thank
us. You all are like amazing at what you do, and we're all together. So it all makes a difference.
We're in it together. So thank you.
Yes. Thanks, guys.